Have you ever had a moment where you got kind of lost? Maybe it was on a hike. Maybe it was in a city that you weren't familiar with. Or if you reach a certain age, you can get lost in a parking garage. You know what I'm talking about? You got off on the wrong floor, don't remember where your car is. Is it over here? Have you ever walked through and you've been hitting the key fob trying to find out, searching for where your car is? Come on, I'm the only one. Raise your hand if you've ever used an actual physical map. If you've ever used a physical map, okay, all right. And raise your hand if you ever went to MapQuest and printed off the directions for a trip. Anybody ever done that? So hold on, hold your hands up. Those of you that don't have your hands up, look around, see all these people with their hands up. Be nice to those people. They are old. They're old. But it can kind of be hard to get lost these days because we all have a little GPS and a map with 3 or 4 different maps apps in our pockets, at all times. But it might not shock you, but I'm not a big hiker. I don't mind it, certainly. It's just not at the top of my list of things that I want to do. Like, let's go climb that mountain. No, thanks. Like, I'd like it more, I think, if every hike ended like at a snack bar or a restaurant, and then they sort of shuttled you back to your car. That would be great. It was like a one-way hike. That would be fantastic. I'm in for that hike. Not a ton of hiking or camping in my life, or really, because of that, opportunities to get lost that way. But we have moved a lot in our life. And when you move to a new city, that you've never been in before, you never lived in before, like for me, I've always felt like it was really fun to just kind of go out and get lost in the city, explore the city, ignore the Maps app, and just go figure out how to get a feel for what the city's like, how to navigate the city. So in 2002, my family and I, we moved to Las Vegas, and that was way before smartphones. And I wasn't a fan of living in Las Vegas, at all. It was horrible. The sun is angry all the time. It's actively trying to kill you, at all times. But one of the things I did really like about living in Las Vegas is that the valley where the city is basically this giant bowl. And the Strip sits at the center of that bowl. And so that means that you can kind of pretty much see the Strip from anywhere else in the valley, night or day. No matter where you are, you can just look up, and there it is. And so that's really helpful when you feel lost, right? Because all you got to do is go, where's the Strip? Oh, there it is. Now I kind of can reorient myself about where I am and how to figure out where to go. And so you always have these landmarks to help you get your bearings. And certainly when we moved there, it saved that, that reality saved my bacon more than a few times. Because it was always just keep moving in the direction of the degenerate gamblers. Just keep going that way and you'll be okay. But whether you're figuring out a new city, or you're taking a hiking path, or the path that you've just kind of chosen to travel, sort of defaulted to in your life, we all need things to help us kind of get and keep our bearings, to help us know which way to go, to help us know how to make decisions on the fly, or just to confirm that, we're actually moving in the right direction, whatever direction that is, or we're moving at least in the direction we want to go, especially when you get turned around, especially when you're sort of confused and overwhelmed and distracted, or just feeling lost, and especially when things get dark. Obviously, we're all moving through life. The question that we have to wrestle with is how do you know where you're going? Right? What helps you get your bearings, not just when you're on a hike or in a new city, but what helps you get your bearings in your life? How can you see when life goes dark? So we've been in this series looking together at the things that Jesus said about himself. There's obviously a lot of noise out there about Jesus, a lot of people saying a lot of different things, a lot of people speaking for him and about him. But in this series, we've kind of stepped back and said, what did he actually say about himself? What are the, and of what he said, what are the implications for us of those things, for how we live, for how we relate to God? Now, if you've never heard these things before that he said about himself, man, that's awesome. We're thrilled that you're here. And honestly, we really believe they can change your life. But if you're here and you've been around church long enough where you actually have heard some of these statements, or maybe all of them, one of the amazing things, and hopefully you know this already, one of the amazing things about the scriptures, about the Word of God, is that it's not just information that once you hear it, now you own it and you know it and you're sort of done. But God's Word is alive and it's powerful. And so the scriptures can find us right where we are and transform and strengthen us this morning. Whether or not this is our first time or we know these stories like the back of our hand, and we grew up in church, and we know exactly where all this is headed. And so I want to take you to a passage in John chapter 8 where Jesus makes this declaration about himself. And so he says this in verse 12. He says, Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. And the Pharisees replied, you are making those claims about yourself. Such testimony is not valid. And Jesus told them, these claims are valid even though I make them about myself, for I know where I came from and where I am going, but you don't know this about me. So a couple of weeks ago when we were kind of setting the stage for this series, one of the things we talked about was about how each of these I am statements that Jesus made, that they are first and foremost a claim that he was making about himself to be God. That he went out of his way to use language that the people who were listening, the people he was talking to, the people around him would know immediately what he was saying. And that's why in this story that we just read, that's why the religious people immediately began to push back and wanted to fight with him. Because they knew what he was saying. They knew that he was going, look, I'm God. I am the light of the world. They knew exactly what he was declaring about himself. And so they come back and they're like, who do you think you are? You can't claim that about yourself. Just because you're claiming to be God doesn't mean that you are God. That's not how this works, Jesus. That's basically what they're saying. Now, what's interesting is that in their argument's actually based on Old Testament law. Because God had actually, in his law with his people in the Old Testament, he had actually talked to them about when somebody is giving testimony about something, or even especially about themselves, there needs to be somebody else or something else that sort of corroborates that testimony. Have you ever argued with God using the scriptures and telling God why he's wrong? God, I don't know if you know the Bible or not, but... And that's what's happening here. And Jesus is like, look, you think that, but that's because you don't understand who I am. I'm the one who actually gave you that law. I gave it to you for your own good and your own protection. But just because you don't know who I am, just because you don't know where I'm from or where I'm going, that doesn't mean anything because I know. And the things that I've done, he actually goes on to explain this in a bunch of different places because this comes up as an argument over and over and over again. But he talks about the things that I've done, the miracles I performed, the signs that I performed, and the Holy Spirit and the Heavenly Father, they all confirm that what I'm saying is true. So I don't need somebody else to testify on my behalf. And so he says, I'm the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. And it's not just any light, it's the light that leads to life. See, I think we're not all that different from the people who were listening to Jesus, who Jesus was talking to in that story, because it turns out finding your way through life has always sort of felt like you're fumbling around in the dark. It always has felt like I'm just not sure where to go or what to do or how do we figure this out. And so humanity has always been searching for answers and asking questions like, who am I and what's life all about? And what's my life all about? And what is it that really matters? And what should I focus on? And how do I deal with disappointment? And is God real? And if he is, what does he care about? And what do I do with people that I don't like or people that are mean or people that are horrible, people that hurt me or the people I love? How should I fill my days? What should I do? Which direction should I go? Why can't I seem to find what I'm looking for? What's going to matter about my life after I'm gone? And it's into all of those questions and all of that sort of confusion, all of the darkness and the shadows that Jesus steps in and he says, if you want to know where to go, if you want to know what to do, if you want to know how to live, if you want to know what you were made for, if you want to know what God wants for you, if you want to see life as it actually is, if you want to see yourself clearly, if you want to know the best way to navigate life and to live it and get the most out of it, follow me, because I'm the light of the world. See, you probably noticed this about life, is that it's hard to get where you're going when you can't see how to get there. But Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. And this imagery and this invitation, these words about Jesus, they're really all over the scriptures. So there's a verse back in the Old Testament in a book, in a prophet named Isaiah that he wrote this down, and you may know it because it gets read a lot at Christmas time. But it was written 750 years before Jesus was born. And it's a prophecy about him that describes the way that he would show up and the kind of impact that he'd have in the world. And this is what it says in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2. It says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. That's you and I, by the way. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. I love driving. I love road trips, especially really long ones. I can drive for hours and hours and hours and hours. And not only does it not bother me, I enjoy it. Like if this pastor thing doesn't work out, like I'm just going to be a long haul trucker. I think that's what the problem is like I eat and drink the entire time I'm driving, so I don't know if that would work out very well for me. I'd be like 700 pounds getting out of the truck. But my wife, Hansi, she does not like road trips at all. And part of it is like she just doesn't like to sit still for very long and do nothing. And so usually about an hour in, she starts going, my butt hurts, I'm sitting, I never sit this much, my butt hurts. I'm like, get a cushion. And so, yeah, we're pretty fun together because I want to drive all day long and she doesn't want to drive a long distance. So a couple of years ago, we helped our oldest son, Jaron, who lives in Tennessee. He was moving to Tennessee. We helped him move to Tennessee. And I have to admit, like the trip that we took to get him there and get back, it pushed me to my limits because round trip we drove just shy of 5,000 miles in 5 days. And so we drove there, spent a half a day unloading him, moving in, turned around, and drove home. And so it was a lot. Like there was a lot of really long days. And to top it off, we did something really smart. We made that trip in the middle of January. And so we dealt with a lot of like really crappy weather and snow and ice as we traveled across the country and driving through Nebraska. But it also meant that we spent a lot of time driving in the dark. And my wife, Hansi, she does this thing when we've been driving for a long time where she starts to get like really defeated and hopeless. And she just starts to say things like, she starts muttering to herself, you know, like, we're just never going to get there. We're just not going to make it. We're not going to make it. We're doomed. I think we're just going to spend the rest of our lives driving in this car. And I find it extremely entertaining. She's not doing it for entertainment value. She's being genuine, but I find it very entertaining. But what I've noticed is that the darker it gets, the more intense that she becomes about in those feelings. And on that particular trip, something happened to me where after driving all of that distance, on driving into the night on days 4 and 5, when we're out in the middle of just nowhere, nothing's around Nebraska, and she starts in with that stuff, I start thinking, maybe she's right. I think we're going to drive forever. We're just stuck. This is our life. We're going to die in our car, frozen on the side of the road in Nebraska. I love the imagery in Isaiah so much in that verse that we read. Because in what he said, like there's this idea where, I mean, there's darkness, but then there's deep darkness, right? There are times where in your life where you feel like you're in the dark, where you're just sort of trying to figure it out, but there's times where you find yourself what he described as living in the land of darkness. But I want you to know this morning that there's actually no darkness that's so deep that God's light cannot reach it, right? That the light of Jesus, that God's light is greater than the deepest dark. I don't know if you've ever noticed how when you're in the dark, like even just a little bit of light changes everything. And so on those road trips, it always seems like just about the time where she starts talking about how hopeless she feels, and it's just like, we're never going to get there, and it's horrible, we're all going to die, because for whatever reason, her thought process always goes to us dying. Like, something's going to happen, we're going to die. Too much like true crime, I think, is going on in her head. But just about the time that starts like feeling overwhelming in the car, it seems like we come up over a ridge or over a mountain or around a bend, and all of a sudden, way off in the distance, there's a little bit of light. And it might just be a little bit of glow from a city that we can't see yet, and we won't reach for another couple of hours, but it doesn't matter. In that moment where that light appears, everything changes. But here's the thing, Jesus isn't just a faint light in the distance. He's the light of the world. Isaiah calls him a great light. In fact, the language that he uses, it doesn't translate really well to English, because what he's actually describing is the greatest of lights, both in its reach, in its brightness, in its brilliance, that he is this great light, that he illuminates everything and everyone. He is the light of the world. And when you think about like darkness, like physical darkness, and the things that happen to us when we're surrounded in darkness and sort of stuck in that place physically, it's true, it starts to happen to us spiritually and emotionally as well, right? Darkness can be very debilitating. It's disorienting because you don't always know where you're going, right? Not only are you not able to see, you lose your sense of direction. Several years ago, quite a few years ago, we were over in Hawaii, and we got to explore this lava tube. And when we got way back in there, they had us turn our headlamps off. And it is the darkest dark that ever darked, that I've ever. It was so, like, doesn't matter how much time you give your eyes to adjust. There's no light, none. And you can't see anything. And at first, it feels like, whoa, this is super dark. It's crazy. You've never experienced it. And after a while, you're like, okay, somebody turn the light on, because it feels really, because you feel like you're just going to fall over. There's nothing to orient yourself with. Dark is cold and lonely and isolating. It feeds fear and despair. Things die in the dark. But the light, oh man, the light is a game changer. It makes us being able to see, it makes sight possible. It allows you to sort of look up and reorient yourself and find direction. It brings warmth. It makes things grow. Without light, there'd be no color in life. Light feeds courage and hope and brings life. Now, all of that stuff is just sort of sitting on the surface of what Jesus said for us to sort of wrestle with and think about and process what that looks like and feels like and means for us spiritually in our lives. But there are also a couple of other things that may not be as obvious. And I want to draw one of them out for you. See, when Jesus claimed to be God, when he said that he's the light of the world, everybody who was there, everyone would have immediately picked up on, thought about, sort of flashed back to Genesis chapter 1 and the story of God creating the universe. And you may be familiar with these verses, but I wanted to read them to you. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, this is not the beginning of God. It's not the beginning of God's story. This is the beginning of our story. And so it says this. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. See, I think this is part of what Jesus is saying in his response to the Pharisees that we read in John 8. When he says, I know where I came from and where I'm going. You don't know. See, I think built into that response is, look, you don't know, like I was there. I'm the light that spoke and created the light. I was the active and am the active force of creation. Right? And that obviously, if you think about that, that's just absolutely sort of mind-blowing. See, the Son of God didn't just show up in the New Testament. In fact, if you go back and read the very beginning of John, John's like, in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was in the beginning was God. And the Word was with God. The Son of God was with God. Like, they were all there in the beginning. And so Jesus is like, look, I know who I am. I know where I'm from. I know I was there. And I think that is why the religious leaders reacted the way that they did. But here's the part where I think things get really kind of cool. So I don't know if you noticed when we read Genesis, those verses in Genesis, notice the state of the way that things were in the very beginning. He says that they were formless. Some translations use the word chaos, like there was just, things were chaotic. It was just nothing but chaos. They were formless, empty, and dark. But then God says, let there be light, and everything changes. And that is still the way that it is, that the light changes everything. See, when Jesus declares himself to be the light of the world, part of what he's saying is, just like in creation, that he's the one who calms the chaos. He's the one who fills the emptiness. He's the one that drives out the darkness. And if I just stop and think about that for just a moment, it really just starts to kind of just blow my mind to think about all the ways in which that is true. That God does that Jesus does that in our life. I mean, think about that first one just for a second, just the idea of formlessness or chaos. See, here's what I've learned. That the more I hide an area of my life from God and his light, the more chaotic that part of my life becomes. It gets infinitely more complicated and confusing and messy. The version we read says that without light, that things were formless, that they were unmade. And what a great picture of our souls, that without the light that Jesus brings, we're literally unmade. There's no structure, there's no character, there's no shape. And so we just sort of get squished and manipulated and molded by whatever and whoever kind of comes along, or whatever and whoever life sort of throws at us. And that's who we are for a little while until something else comes along and just reshapes us, that we're unmade. See, when you and I decide, God, I love that your light, just not over here. Like, this area is mine. Don't shine your light over there. That part of our life starts to slowly, but very specifically, move towards being unmade, towards chaos. And then what do? We scratch our heads and we can't, I don't know what's going on. Why is this so crazy over here? But when we come into the light, here's the thing. Everything doesn't magically get easy, but he does begin to calm the chaos. And he starts to form and shape our hearts and our lives in his image. And he makes something beautiful and new out of that which was unmade and formless. And then there's the imagery that he uses in Genesis of emptiness. Some translations use the word void. I love what John says in John 1:4. It says, in him, speaking of Jesus, in him was life, and that life was the light of all humankind. I mean, what a thing for John to say. See, here's the simple truth about Jesus. His light fills our emptiness with his life. Without his light, there's a void, there's a vacuum, there's just emptiness. There's an ache, there's a space, there's a longing to be filled. And so what do? You know, you've done it and I've done it. We try to fill that space, that emptiness, with anything and everything that we can. I mean, all of us know what that feels like, to get into and chase after having more, doing more, certain relationships, filling our life so much so that we try to do or be or believe in, the life that we try to live, our relationships, who we decide to become. So much of it is just an attempt to do something for ourselves that we don't have the ability to do, and that is to fill the void in our souls. But that's the good news this morning, that in him was life, and that life was the light for all of us. And so if you'll let him, God will pour his light into the emptiness of your life and begin to fill it with overflowing, uncontainable life and goodness. And then there's that third image in Genesis, the image of darkness, that things were formless and empty and dark. And that darkness was expansive, it was overwhelming, and it was complete. But then God speaks, and the light knocks the darkness backwards. The light puts the darkness on its heels. His light illuminates and eliminates the darkness. Have you ever gotten up in the middle of the night and you think you know where everything is, but there was one thing that you forgot about or didn't know about or didn't count on because you have kids? And so you ran into something or stepped on something or stepped on a Lego or stubbed your toe on a piece of furniture or tripped over a bag or an instrument or a toy or some laundry or some dishes that you left there earlier but forgot. I'm just, riffing possibilities, and none of these have actually happened to me. I do this thing where I try to make my way through the darkness in our living room on a regular basis, and we have an ottoman, and I'm primarily the one that uses the ottoman, so I think I know always where the ottoman is, but I don't. And I have walked full speed into our ottoman more times than I can remember. And I don't tell my wife because she thinks it's funny when I hurt myself. And I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. But I think that's a great picture of the way that so often we're going through life, right? Like when you're walking in darkness, even when you think you know where things are, you don't know where everything is. In fact, the scriptures paint this picture that apart from Jesus and the light that he brings into our life, it describes us as being spiritually blind, that it's impossible for us to see. That Jesus, his light doesn't just illuminate darkness, but it actually gives us that he rips the scales from our eyes and actually opens our eyes so that we can begin to see what we could not see before. And so the closer that you are to him, the clearer that you can see everything else. See, when you're in the dark, there are two ways that you can discover the wall that's in front of you. You can see it, or you can hit it. If you have the light hits the wall and illuminates it and shows you like, oh, this is the way, this is what this is really about. It's by the light that we see the reality of everything else. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, this guy named Paul, he wrote this letter to a church that he started in a city called Corinth. And he writes these words in verse 6. He says, "For God, who said, 'Let there be light in the darkness,' has made this light shine in our hearts so that we could know the glory of God that's seen in the face of Jesus Christ. And we now have this light shining in our hearts. We ourselves are like clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God and not from ourselves." What an incredible declaration. That Jesus doesn't just light up the world. He actually makes his light shine in our world, in our hearts, in our lives. He doesn't just illuminate the darkness out there. He illuminates the darkness in here, in me. That I'm just a simple jar of clay. There's nothing super flashy or special looking on the outside, but inside we contain the greatest treasure of all, his light. So that whatever power and beauty and life that we have, it's obvious that it's not from us, it's from God. So back in John chapter 8, Jesus said that because that he's the light of the world, that we don't have to walk in darkness. But here's the thing, just because you don't have to doesn't mean that you can't choose to. And I wonder for us this morning, where is it that you've deliberately chosen to kind of keep things hidden, keep things shielded? What part of your life have you sort of shielded from God's light or from God's view and just like, no, God, it's fine. Help me over here to help me figure out my finances, help me figure out my job, help me figure out family stuff, but you leave this piece alone. What chaos have you continually invited into your life as a result of doing that? What emptiness are you trying to fill right now in your life with something that could never fill it? Because it's not the light from God. What are the walls that you keep running into because you're trying to just feel your way around in the dark? Is the light that you're following leading to life? If not, maybe it's not actually light, which sounds ridiculous that there can be light that's somehow not light, but it's something that Jesus actually said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 23. He said, if the light you think you have, or in some versions it says the light that's within you, if that light is actually darkness, how deep is the darkness? And here's the scary part. He didn't say that to horrible, evil, God-hating atheists. He said that to people like you and me. I wonder what things about you or about the world around you that you might be able to see much clearer if you just were closer to Jesus, if you just opened your life and your heart to him and his light. Where is it that you need light this morning? What are the things that you need the light of the world to illuminate for you? Today would be a really good time to invite him into those places. By the way, there's kind of a second part to this whole light conversation. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 14, these are the words of Jesus. He's speaking to his followers. He says, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." See, when you connect to Jesus, his light becomes your light. Our lives begin to bring hope and beauty to the world around us. And so he says, in the same way, meaning that our lives should reflect his light in a way that produces good that can be seen by others. That people should be drawn towards God and move to a place of even thanking a God that they're not sure they believe in because of our faith, because they see his light in us, because of the way that we live and love and treat each other. And this is true both personally, like for us as individuals. It's also true for us as a church family, that the way that the church that we choose to become and the way that we behave and the way that we exist in this valley and the way that we love our neighbors and the way that we serve the school and the community that we're in, that is light. And so before we leave today, I actually want to spend a few minutes talking to you about that. And so we're going to pray together, and then I have one other thing I want to share with you. So let's pray.